A very good morning to everybody. And at the outset, let me thank Shri Dwivedi for opening up this very, very interesting topic of energy transition, decarbonization, and digital transformation in the exploration and production industry. Am I audible to everyone properly? Yeah, thank you so much. And then I do see that the audience number is low. That gives you more opportunity to ask more questions. So let us try to make it as interactive as possible. As Sir mentioned, I am a professor by profession. I like teaching and I like sharing my thoughts. And this is a very pertinent topic. I don't know whether it is by chance or it is by design, but this topic on one hand talks about the supply side of the market, and on the other hand it talks about the demand side of the oil and gas market. I am from economics background and I tend to see supply and demand in most of the things. That's why I said I really don't know whether the topic has been coined that ways or I have derived this kind of a meaning out of this. I have a small visuals also. I'll try to open that. Great. So I come from Great Lakes Institute of Management. A brief introduction to that. Great Lakes Institute of Management was set up in 2004 in Chennai. As the name suggests, a lot of resources were drawn from the Great Lakes region of US. Great Lakes, our founding dean, Professor Bala Vichandran, was also the Professor Emeritus at Kellogg School of Business. He was also the dean, founding dean of MDI Gurgaon, founding dean of ISB Hyderabad. And then he realized that we need to set up a different kind of an institution in India, and he wanted to draw resources from the Great Lakes region of US, and that's how the name came to Great Lakes. We talk about global mindsets and local roots. Local roots in lakes means that knowledge has been related to water. Like knowledge finds its way, like water finds its way, knowledge will also find its way. So that is how Great Lakes came up, and in 2010 we started energy-specific programs in Gurgaon. And in very short period of time, we were able to create an excellent pool of human resources for the energy sector, for oil and gas, power, and renewable. And that's how we see many of our products. Many of our students are today in the consulting industry and in the oil and gas, as well as renewable energy sector. My background is economics. I try to find out logic in the various trends that are happening in the oil and gas industry. And that's how we proceed further. So as I told you, I've broken this entire topic into two areas, energy transition and decarbonization, which talks about the demand side of the industry. Whereas digital transformation and exploration of oil and gas, that speaks about the supply side. When I say supply side, why are we doing all this digital transformation? To to increase the efficiency of oil recovery and also to reduce the costs. So if we look at the overall recovery rates in the oil and gas region, this would be somewhere around, average would be somewhere around 35%. Just imagine that if we double this efficiency, the recovery rate would be 70% and the amount of oil available in the world will just double. So that's why I say that this part of the topic deals largely with the supply side. We also want that the cost of production should be lower. Of late, we have seen, it's been now almost around 20 years that we're talking about no cheap oil. There was a time when oil was below $20 most of the times. If we look at this, so the green line in this diagram, it shows the actual nominal prices. And for a very long time, we will see a very straight kind of a graph. That means the prices, oil prices were low. And after 1991, definitely the prices have spiked up and they have tended to remain at a higher level. And that's why we're talking about there is no more cheap oil. But that is how it has been till now. The coming times, the new trends which we are going to see, might see a different reason. But today, we are ruling out availability of cheap oil, and that is why the emphasis on digital transformation. There have been various case studies, Chevron, Kuwait Oil Company, in India, Oil India Limited. Each one of them, all companies are employing this, and they've had some benefits. We will not say remarkable benefits in terms of costs and remarkable benefits in terms of outputs. The recovery rates by enhanced oil recovery mechanisms have increased by around 5%, 6%, which obviously I don't feel that it is very encouraging. The costs remain high. We need to bring them down. But since I'm giving this a shape of economics, so one side we have demand. How is it a demand-related situation? Demand-related situation is that as demand for electric vehicles increases, as demand for electric power increases, demand for liquid fuels will come down. So oil and gas industry faces a tough competition from renewable energy and the traditional power. Given this situation, we generally talk about balancing the demand with supply in order to have a stable equilibrium and also stable, sustainable prices. As an economist, people will say that these two trends of energy transition, as well as the supply side of digitalization, they should be mapped. But as an energy economist, I say that no, it doesn't have to be mapped. They are conflicting in nature. I take the discussion further. Why are we talking about the energy transition and decarbonization? The two reasons. On the left side, you will see we are talking about finiteness of the oil and gas resources. We're talking about around 139 years of coal available with us, 56 years of oil, and 49 years of gas. This finiteness creates a sense of energy insecurity. Of course, the geopolitics adds to this energy insecurity. And hence people are wanting to store more oil, which means that there is one demand which is for actually running the economy, and then other demand is only the risk. That what if tomorrow this oil is not available, so let me hold it. So today's prices are carrying a large component of risk premium. For a long time, we have been trying to find solution to this energy insecurity. And this has been a major work for the geologists, for other experts. But gradually we found that this problem of finiteness of resources, which is below the earth, is less than the problem above the earth. Because as new reserves were found, as demand increased, we produced more oil, we consumed more oil, and as a result, we see that our environment has started crying that this kind of consumption is not sustainable. Global warming is wanting us to lower the consumption, per capita consumption of fossil fuels. On the right-hand side, if you see that yellow line, if it is visible to everyone, the yellow line is the emission of carbon dioxide by United States, which seems to have come down a little bit. Similarly, European Union, it has come down a little bit. But look at the way carbon emission has increased in case of China. It offsets all the benefits of energy conservation which is done by the developed world. And if we look at the dark blue curve, which represents India's, that has also seen a substantial rise. Overall, Asia-Pacific region is showing a much larger consumption of fossil fuels. By saying this, it seems as if we are blaming China and India for increasing the carbon emission. But then, who is China producing for? China seems to be producing for everybody in this world. It is the manufacturing hub of the world. And as long as it remains manufacturing hub of the world, it is going to be painted with a picture called as a dirty country, which is polluting the entire world. But the pollution is coming from the demand from the rest of the world. Why I am emphasizing on this particular part is because now, after some time, I'm going to change. I'm going to talk about how the world order is changing, because of which these kind of graphs will likely to be irrelevant. So when we said that it is the regions above the earth which are more responsible for this new kind of transition of energy is happening, it is because if we look at the proved reserves in 1,000 million barrels, in 1980, the world had around 682.6 thousand million barrels of proved reserves of oil. This was considered, this is what I said, finiteness. By 2020, it has increased to 1,732, almost 3 times. And in coming times, with the better technology, we will be able to find out more oil and gas. And look at the consumption. Consumption was around 61 million barrels in 1980, and it has increased only to around 100 million barrels per day of consumption, which means that it has not even doubled. On one hand, the proved reserves are increasing 3 times, whereas consumption has not even doubled. This implies that the problem that we foresee, the insecurity that we have about finiteness of these resources is less of a menace than the problem which is facing us, which is largely the global warming and geopolitics. The right side of this slide, it shows that there are 2 scenarios which we're talking about, that how the carbon emissions are going to play in future. By 2050, so there is a light green line which talks about if we are not following the net zero emissions targets that the countries have set for themselves. but there is a sharp decline if we say that the countries will be able to follow their net zero declarations, whichever they have given. In case of India, we see there is quite a significant improvement. So whatever targets we had to achieve in, let's say, 10 years' time, we are taking less than half of that to achieve. So if we see that most of the countries may have almost similar kind of experience, then we might see that this dark line downward trend of carbon emissions will be realized. But if it is not realizing, that again is a big challenge. So I looked at the oil market report for 2025, and it talks about the overall consumption of oil. The rate of growth in consumption of oil is going to decline in next few years. It is talking about 2025, it also talks about 2026, but why are we talking on these lines? This is where I am trying to bring in the global energy environment into picture, and how investments are going to build into both on the energy transition as well as on the digitalization of the processes of exploration and production. I think people here may agree that till now, the amount of investment which we were thinking should come into digitalization of resources has not actually happened. In the last 30 years, the rate of growth that people expected has not been achieved. On one hand, it looks that it is alarming. Why didn't they do it? But on the other hand, it seems that it is blessing in disguise. Why is it blessing in disguise? Because if there was more digitalization, the impact of that would have been better on efficiency, and we would be burning more fossil fuels. And that is how we are aggravating the dangers of sustainability. Today, where do we want the money? The globe is scarce about capital. Where do we want the capital to go? The capital to go towards transition to renewable energy and other non-fossil fuels, or investment which increases the amount of production of fossil fuels. For some time, it will be necessary that investment should go into production of fossil fuels, because you cannot replace that quickly. So currently we see around 80% of the overall consumption of energy is largely coming from the fossil fuels. So replacing all that will take time, but the rate at which the replacement is happening is very encouraging. Now, if we talk about investments in the energy transition technologies, what does investment depend upon? Many people feel that investment depends upon the rate of return, but largely the interest rates depend upon, the investment rate depends upon the rate of interest which is prevailing in the economy. The cost of funds. What is the kind of cost of fund that we are going to expect in next few years? The way protectionism has been unleashed, the way Trump is unleashing tariffs, we are going to see there is a significant decrease in trade. A significant decrease in trade means that a large amount of export income to a very large component of the economy will reduce. Imagine if China has to withstand 125% tariff. That means it cannot produce. Who does it produce for? A very large amount of their trade is happening to US, India, European Union, Japan. Keeping aside the European Union, if we talk about US, India, Japan, Australia, all these places gradually are going to be no-go for China. And if it is no-go, what will happen to average cost of production for Chinese products? They've created huge facilities, huge amount of fixed investment. How is that going to be utilized? If they're utilizing just 50% of their capacity, what does this mean? Operating a plant at 50% capacity means average cost will increase. China's dominance in the trade has been its cheap prices. So a large part of their consumption market is not going to buy from them because of geopolitical reasons, and then a large part of their market will not be able to buy because China's cost of production will rise. So if China's cost of production rises, it is not able to export much. What happens to GDP? It comes down. And what will be the impact thus on India's exports to China? And India's export to many other countries. So we are expecting, most of the reports are talking about this Trump's tariff fascination is going to destroy economies of various nations. That means the GDP growth rates might converge, and as a result, India's potential to export becomes questionable. So what comes out of all this? If this protectionism continues for a longer time, so there are two dimensions, whether it will continue for a longer time or not. So let's go by the first one, that if it continues for a longer time, then what change do we expect in this case of carbon emissions? Since China is producing for the world, so it will not produce for the world. And as a result, the trends which are seen on the right side of this diagram, of this slide, these seem to be changing. If GDP, so these trends are expected to change. All resources in the oil and gas industry must start taking these trends very seriously. If this happens, once again, the fixed investments that companies have done, it will become very difficult to revive, to retrieve, to get adequate returns on that. And given this kind of situation, if we are talking about investing in increasing the efficiency of oil and gas production processes, then probably the companies might be moving on the wrong foot. Number two, whether these changes are going to be temporary or they're going to be permanent. I think I'll stop here for the time being for people to think about. If there are any questions, we can take it, and I would like to invite the next speaker. Thank you so much.